Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming in this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's managing editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, and Lynette Mullen, our Eureka-based historian and contributor. Welcome to you both.
Hey, Tanya.
How's everybody doing this week?
I am deeply excited that we've finally lured Lynette into this, and she's got a fantastic story that she's been working on for a long time.
And a two-parter, so we get to loop her back in next week as well, if she'll have us.
I am thrilled to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share these stories.
Well, let's dive right in. And Lynette, you are bringing the cover story, a two-parter, a very exciting topic from long ago.
Yes, I am.
So tell us what is coming to the cover story this week.
All right. Well, it's interesting because folks that are familiar with Eureka, that have been here a long time, have probably heard rumors or hints as to Eureka's reputation as an open town. And a lot of times I think when you hear about that, people are talking about the 1950s, and how wild and crazy Eureka was then. But it started much, much earlier than that. And so I go back over 100 years to start talking about kind of the early red light area of Eureka and move into the time when we actually had a red light district, like with boundaries, and kind of how that developed, what happened there, how it was treated by the community, and then how things evolved over time as folks started realizing maybe that they didn't want Eureka to have the wild open reputation that it did. Maybe they wanted to clean up and spiffy up a bit.
Well, and it kind of surprised me to learn that there was this sanctioned off district, very much like I've heard that New Orleans was back in the day.
Yes. The difference, though, my understanding of Storyville is it may have actually been legal there, where in Eureka, in California, prostitution was never legal. But it was considered by many, boy, I'm going to just dive right in here, to be necessary. So even though it wasn't legal, there were a lot of folks that believed that men, single men, but also married men, needed an outlet. It's something called the volcano theory, and we talk about it in the story, that if men didn't have a way to sexually express themselves, that bad things would happen. That tension would build up, and frankly, innocent women would end up being victims. And so a lot of folks felt like these poor prostitutes, quite frankly, could be a target of that energy and save the decent women.
Well, and it was, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Sorry. I love how there's no thought of what can we do to make sure that men don't become destructive? It's like, no, we just need to find some women upon which they can be destructive.
Well, and it also couples with the idea that self-help was thought to be even more dangerous.
That was one of the interesting, when I was researching this, and I found this a while ago, I am fortunate enough to be a member of Ancestry.com, so you can go in and there's census records and directories and that sort of thing, but there are also admission records from the early state insane asylums, which it's frankly fascinating reading all the way around. But I was absolutely shocked to find that some of the causes, some of the men that were admitted to these institutions, the only cause that was thought to create their insanity was masturbation. And what I'm thinking is that somebody who is unstable or depressed or whatever would come in, the physician would be talking to them, and the physician would go, well, do you engage in this activity? And of course, 98% of the men would say yes, and the other two would deny it, and probably wouldn't be true. But my guess is that the man would say, well, yeah, I do. And the doctor would be like, that's why you're crazy. That's what's going on. So there was no real link, but people truly believed it, clearly believed it. I have books, health books, that warn against self-abuse and all the terrible things that can happen. Yeah, so especially if you think about Humboldt County and you think about the logging and the sailors coming in and out and all these laborers in the mills and that sort of thing. These guys weren't getting married anytime soon. It's not like they had, developed savings or that they could buy homes. But yet you're talking, healthy men in their 20s, 30s. People thought they needed an outlet.
And obviously this also became a revenue machine for the city of Eureka.
It did, in a lot of different ways. I mean, so the city over time would try to figure out how to get revenue directly from the women, say taxes and that sort of thing, or licenses. But of course, as we just discussed, it was illegal. So that was problematic. But even before those discussions really happened, the city was recognizing, and I think a lot of communities did, that these particular districts brought men in, men with money that needed to buy supplies, that needed to buy food, that would stay in the lodging houses, saloons. So men would visit the brothels for generally a pretty short period of time, but they had to spend time before and after, right? And if you're renting a room in a lodging house or a hotel that's tucked away and cold and dark, you want to be around people. And so saloons would generally be the place they stopped before. They would go and visit a woman, and then they'd come back. So saloons and gambling halls really also benefited from these districts. And then and we won't get too much into it just because the second part, as you mentioned, we'll talk a lot more about how the city was trying to capitalize on the money that was coming in and take that money directly from the women. And frankly came up with some pretty ugly ways to do that. But there, like I said, there were just additional, it's like having a tourist attraction, and if you have a great tourist attraction in town, people are going to eat at the restaurants nearby and hang out for a day or two. And, if you've got sailors coming in, you want them to stay in Eureka. So
I have to say that we are not just going to skip over the way you just shaded men from 200 years ago by saying it was a brief stop in the brothel.
Oh,
you thought we missed it. We did not.
well,
but I was amazed when I read this to see the numbers. Like that there were something like how many saloons and how many brothels?
Gosh, yeah, I don't have it. Well, there were 30 plus saloons. I mean, in the 1880s even, and 60 plus brothels. I mean, there was an incredible number. And part of it with the brothels is by pretty early on, other communities decided they didn't want that sort of thing. So Ferndale had the house on the hill or the cottage on the hill. And that was established by the 1880s. And if folks are familiar with Ferndale, if you I don't know what direction, towards the end of town, if you turn towards the cemeteries, between the two cemeteries, there is a house on the hill that if you've been here a very, very long time, it's the same house that was in Salem's Lot, where the creepy murderous guy lived. They'd put a false front. I've been here long enough that I saw that. But that house in particular, it had been a landfill there, which I learned later. So it makes sense that nobody else wanted that house. It's the current owners let me walk through it and kind of described the way it was. All the trails though came in the back. Right? So women didn't, their sons, their husbands, their brothers, all those men came to visit the house through the back, so nobody knew who they were. There were other brothels that were developed in Ferndale, but the wives and daughters weren't having it. They basically said one is enough. One is enough up on the hill where we don't have to see it, and drove the others out. Like literally kicked them out of town. There was a poor woman, and I couldn't really cover it in this story, but I have in the Enterprise. So if folks are interested, they can always get in touch with me. This poor woman named Minnie French, and she had taken the name Edna Gardner, and her husband had disappeared. So she's got a little girl, And back then, we're talking 1890s, like there's no way to feed your child and work and have a place to live. I mean, it was just impossible. And so this poor woman had boarded out her child and was trying to build one of the few businesses that were open to her. She actually literally was trying to build a brothel in Ferndale, and the wives and daughters of the prominent citizens burnt it to the ground.
Meanwhile, though, it really struck me, something that struck me about this story that we have this week is that that same class of women and the same class of men, these sort of more well-to-do folks, were very happy profiting off of the brothels, as not only in like fines and tax, like, you know, illegal taxes in the form of fines, but also as landlords. That really, I was very surprised at the way that, oh, well, I should mention, we have a typo in the story that has, instead of 127 Third Street.
It says 129 and it's 127.
And it says 127, and we felt terrible about that. Oh, here we are maligning this other building that was never a brothel. But in fact, the addresses on both sides of that location were also brothels. If you can picture, like, imagine 60 Starbucks in Eureka. And after a while, you keep seeing that green mermaid, and you're like, am I just living inside a giant Starbucks? Imagine it like that. It's wild. And people who were well-to-do, you know, you have a little pull-out part about the Callahan family.
Yes. Do you want me to describe that? That was, and it took me, that was surreal. So what happened in Eureka? There were a lot of people that came early to Eureka and just invested in property, right? In Old Town, thinking that the town would grow inland, and they'd make money. The less desirable areas over time is like by the waterfront and F Street where the big buildings are, and you can still see it, like the beautiful architecture, the investment that was made in that part of town. People didn't want that sullied necessarily by these houses of ill fame. And so literally the structures would be picked up and moved. And then additional buildings, like the cheap stuff, went kind of southwest towards the co-op. So for folks that are familiar with Old Town, if you picture yourself maybe at the gazebo there and kind of picture, you know, towards the co-op, those buildings are flat or squatter, right? So over time, even buildings that may have started as dwellings, in that part of town, which didn't have the city services, didn't get hooked up to sewer very quickly, didn't get street lights, like that was kind of the other side of the tracks for Eureka. Over time, as more people came here and there was, frankly, increased demand for the services of prostitutes, sex workers, that is where they located. And so a lot of these folks that invested early on certainly had the choice when they found themselves renting to, you know, landladies, as they were called, these brothel managers, because not many women own the properties. Normally they rented. They could have sold that property. They could have done something different, but there were certain families that held on, in part because you could make so much more money. I mean, it's... a lot of landlords would confess that. They would say, you know what, I can charge double the rent if somebody's doing sex work out of my place, and they pay on time and they never complain. That type of thing. So some folks held on to those properties. There was a man named Bartholomew Callahan that had bought property over in what ended up being the red light district, that area, the parking lot where the co-op is right now, just to make it easy for folks that are familiar. So that block, that quarter block there, and there were dwellings there. And over time, those dwellings started being used as brothels, and frankly became kind of the worst of the worst. These poor women in that particular area, but it was also the shabbiest part of town. But Callahan held onto those properties and in fact deeded them as a gift out of love and affection to his wife. Yeah, kind of interesting, right? Here's some brothels, honey. And what I actually think, and this isn't in the story, my guess is every once in a while the city would think they needed to do something, about the fact that these houses existed and would target property owners. And my guess is that Callaghan thought that if the property was in his wife's name, he was probably safer, and I'm sure that's true. But anyway, so his first wife had the property. She passed away, so he got it back. Second wife ended up with the property. And so we're into the 1890s now, and unfortunately it was and it's in the article, but 1897, 1898, she gave birth to a little boy and knew right away that she was ill and she was probably going to pass away. And so what she did is she owned this kind of quarter block of brothels, right? She deeded them out of love and affection to her 3-year-old daughter and her newborn son. And so they became the owners of these brothels. Yeah. And the dad, again, and I'm thinking, that part of and maybe for the mom, I mean, they were money makers. They really were. So I could see the mother thinking, okay, even if dad doesn't really take care of them, I'm giving my kids something. And dad was really good, weirdly enough, about reporting. What he claimed is that he took $25 a month in revenue out of those properties. Guarantee it was a lot more than that. The 1900 census, he's not working. Isn't that weird that he didn't have to be employed at a real job? But the properties were in the kid's name and stayed until the 1920s. Like the kids held on to them. So that was one. Yeah.
Well, Lynette, it's a fascinating story. I hope everybody picks up this edition of the North Coast Journal or goes online and reads the entire story, part 1, for themselves. And thank you so much for bringing it to us and bringing it to the journal. And with that, we're going to pivot back to Jennifer. She has the set list with Colin Yo. You want to know.
So, Colin, oh my God. So when I'm not going to spoil.
Don't spoil it. It's amazing.
I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there is an existential journey that we go on in the column this week, and I really appreciated it, and I really needed it. And
Perhaps
I just want to
new moon and eclipse season kind of brought out that existential side of him this week.
Maybe. It's hard to say. Actually, you know what? Somebody just sent me a whole astrological breakdown in an email that at this point I'm like, I am willing to accept this as some sort of reason or causation for our current plight because I have no other ideas. But Colin is highlighting a couple of shows that are, well, he has a bunch of shows all week, except for Monday and Tuesday. A little quiet on Monday and Tuesday. A little time to relax, stay home, catch up on your streaming queue. But there are a couple of shows back to back, Thursday and Friday, that I thought are worth mentioning because they're cool. So, for one thing, on Thursday night, the Creative Sanctuary, hey Creative Sanctuary, has another in its series on the Jazz Messengers. And I love that they've been doing this. They've been having these different pieces, different members of the Jazz Messengers, and really digging into each element's musical contributions. And James Zeller, hey James Zeller, who you always see related to things at the Creative Sanctuary, always doing something interesting and always lifting up other musicians, which you love to see. And Ramsey Isaacs and the rest of the gang that are frequently playing together are going to be playing tribute to Wayne Shorter, who was a sax player or saxophonist, as I'm told. And it's a very cool bebop to hip hop journey that they're going to go on, which is, I think that's very cool that they're doing that. And it is at the Arcata Playhouse. And this is one of those cool things where you're supporting the Playhouse, you're supporting artists, you're supporting the Creative Sanctuary, which still needs repairs and whatnot. And it's a sliding scale, 10 to $30. It's just one of those shows that's everything good about Humboldt, right? Creative people looking back, and it's kind of like going to school in a very, very fun way, like a musical lecture, an educational experience. I kind of love that. And then on Friday,
oh my gosh,
you may have, I know.
This is one of my favorite names I've ever heard of a cover band.
I'm wondering. So on Friday night, if you go to Outer Space at 7:30, and this is another cool thing, you're going to be out anyway for Arcata Friday Night Market, right?
Absolutely.
You are. It's the last one of the season, so you might as well go. And over there at the Outer Space at 7:30, there is going to be a local showcase, intimate, all ages, sober joint, as he describes it. The Cowtown Sound. Is that the one?
No. It's
Jellyworks?
Nope.
Halfwing? The Dynamites? What is it?
Hispanic at the Disco?
Hispanic at the Disco. No, Hispanic at the Disco is on
it's
Saturday.
At the Cumbia.
It's at the Cumbia thing. There's
it's the wrong show.
We'll get to it.
My apologies.
But the Creative Sanctuary gig it's just cool that there's an all ages space. For those of us who can still summon the memory of youth, not having a place to go hang out that is safe and sober, and that's a very cool thing to have. So go support the show and support the local acts over there on Saturday. Indeed. We jumped the gun on Drag Loteria. 8 p.m. at the Lager Bar. This is also a moment of Humboldtness.
Indeed.
We literally have a place called the Lager Bar.
Oh, it's the best.
The Lager Bar, which is an old, historic place where, surprise, surprise, loggers went, and there's gonna be Latinx drag. That is what I love to see. So, Val de Flores, Kombucha, hey Kombucha, what's going on? And Hispanic at the Disco are going to be there. It's kind of wonderful, right? This is the magic mixing of Humboldt, the magic candy grab bag of Humboldt County. Is you just do not know what combinations are possible until you open up the grid in the paper, or open up the set list, and drag your finger down. And what was there a band on there called Fleetwood Macrame? My friend, there is.
And also that the loggers bringing this cumbia, I just learned about this genre, and I'm all for it.
I love cumbia because cumbia is one of those things, like, you see young people doing it, you see old people doing it, and you're like, dang, if I learn this, I could do this forever.
Absolutely.
As long as I, wait a couple weeks for my artificial hip to come in, I can keep doing cumbia. I don't suppose, well, I won't drag Lynette into the cumbia.
I am not familiar.
I think it's time. I
it's
think we need
also
to...
anything that's bringing goth back around, I'm all for it.
Right? There is, by the way, at this week, it's not in the set list, but it is in the grid. There is over at Mendhall Studios on Saturday night, I believe, there's a goth night. Goth night with one of my favorite bands, Burke and the Jerks, will be playing with a band called Bat Noise.
Ooh.
Right?
I
Could
love
you get
Burke and the
spookier?
Jerks. Gotta go check them out.
But I love that the goth thing is,
it's real.
Listen,
bring it back.
my nails are already painted. I'm ready.
I know,
Let's
I may
go.
look shiny and happy, but I was a Robert Smith kid for years, so.
Oh, let's tease our hair.
Yeah, let's
do
do
it.
Well, that pretty much wraps up our time this week. We don't want to go too long on our illustrious producer. we have part 1, but that wraps up the current edition of the North Coast Journal. Will be available on newsstands tomorrow, or of course, you can always find it online at northcoastjournal.com, and get ready for part 2 next week. I am Tanya. I appreciate both Jennifer and Lynette joining us this week and hope to see you back next week. Thanks for being with us, staying informed and supportive here on the North Coast in our community.